Pause for a moment, and ask yourself, are you truly in control of your life, or are you unknowingly being guided by forces within you that you barely understand? According to Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, every human being carries not only a conscious self, the part that thinks, decides, and acts, but also a vast and powerful unconscious world. This unconscious is not empty, it holds forgotten memories, hidden desires, repressed emotions, and even ancient patterns of thought that humanity has carried for thousands of years. Jung believed that much of who we are is shaped not by what we consciously know, but by what lies hidden beneath the surface. At the center of our awareness, Jung placed the ego. The ego is what we recognize as I, the decisions we make, the goals we pursue, the way we respond to daily life. But beyond the ego lies the shadow, the side of ourselves we refuse to see, the anger, fear, or impulses that we try to suppress. Beyond that lies the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of symbols, instincts, and archetypes that we share with all of humanity. These hidden forces influence our personalities, our relationships, our choices, and even our destiny. To Jung, the path of becoming a superior person was not about pretending to be perfect, nor was it about seeking external success. It was about turning inward, confronting the shadow, understanding the archetypes, balancing the masculine and feminine within, and ultimately awakening the self, the totality of who we are. A person who brings unconscious truths into consciousness becomes whole, authentic, and free. This is the mark of a superior human being, not someone flawless, but someone who knows themselves fully, and lives with deep awareness. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is not a simple or one-dimensional structure, it is an entire inner universe, full of hidden landscapes, opposing forces, and symbolic meanings that if you wish to become a superior person, the first step is to recognize that within you there exists a map, a psychological geography that must be studied and understood. Without this map, you are like a traveler wandering blindly through unknown territory. With it, you can begin to see where your strengths lie, where your challenges hide, and how your conscious and unconscious selves interact. The center of this inner map is what Jung called the ego. The ego is your conscious identity, the I that thinks, decides, remembers, and chooses. It is the part of you that experiences the world directly. However, Jung warned that the ego is only a small portion of the psyche. To mistake it for the whole of who you are, is to remain blind to the deeper realities of your being. Surrounding the ego are layers that influence you constantly, whether you acknowledge them or not. The first layer beyond the ego is the personal unconscious. This is where forgotten experiences, repressed emotions, hidden desires, and unresolved conflicts reside. These are things you may not think about daily, but they shape your reactions, your fears, and your decisions. A childhood memory you barely recall might still influence the way you respond to authority figures, or the way you handle conflict in your adult life. This unconscious layer is deeply personal, unique to your history and experiences. Beyond the personal unconscious lies something even more profound, the collective unconscious. Jung introduced this idea to explain why human beings across time and culture share common patterns of thought, emotion, and imagination. The collective unconscious contains what he called archetypes, universal symbols and motifs that show up in myths, religions, fairy tales, and dreams. The hero, the caregiver, the trickster, the wise old man, these figures appear everywhere, not because they are taught, but because they are built into the very structure of the human mind. Recognizing archetypes in yourself and in others allows you to see which universal forces are at play in your life. Another crucial part of this inner map is the persona, the mask you wear in society. The persona is the version of yourself that you show to others, designed to meet social expectations and gain acceptance. It is not inherently false, in fact, it is necessary for survival in social groups. But problems arise when you begin to confuse the mask with your true self, or when you cling so tightly to it that you cannot take it off, even in private. To understand your persona is to recognize the difference between the role you play and the person you truly are. Opposite to the persona is the shadow, which contains everything you reject about yourself. This includes not only traits that society disapproves of, such as anger, jealousy, or selfishness, but also qualities you have denied because they do not fit your self-image. Someone who prides themselves on being kind may repress feelings of resentment, while someone who values toughness may hide their vulnerability. The shadow, if ignored, grows darker and more destructive. But if confronted and integrated, it becomes a source of strength and wisdom. Finally, there is the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men and the inner masculine in women. Jung believed that each person carries within them contrasexual traits that must be acknowledged and balanced in order to achieve wholeness. Denying them leads to imbalance and rigidity, accepting them leads to flexibility and depth. All of these elements, ego, personal unconscious, collective unconscious, archetypes, persona, shadow, anima, animus, surround and point towards something greater, which Jung called the self. The self is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and dark, masculine and feminine, past and future. It is not simply an idea, but an experience of unity and completeness. The journey to becoming superior is essentially the journey of moving from a narrow ego identity to the vast, integrated reality of the self. When you begin to explore this map of your inner world, you stop living blindly. You start to see patterns in your thoughts, your dreams, and your behaviors. You learn to distinguish between what is truly you and what is only a mask. Between what is conscious choice and what is unconscious influence. With this awareness, you become the navigator of your psyche, rather than its prisoner. And that is the first step toward true superiority, to know the terrain of your own mind. To truly walk the path of Jungian psychology, one must face what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not an external enemy, but the part of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. It contains impulses, fears, and emotions you consider unacceptable. Society teaches us to repress anger, jealousy, envy, or selfishness. But repression does not erase these forces. Instead, they sink into the unconscious, where they grow darker, more dangerous, and more capable of controlling us from the shadows. Imagine someone who prides themselves on being generous. Such a person may unconsciously deny feelings of greed or resentment. But instead of disappearing, these emotions fester, leaking out in subtle ways. Perhaps through passive-aggressive behavior, or through envy of others' success. Jung taught that every individual must recognize their shadow, not to indulge it, but to integrate it. Integration means bringing the hidden aspects of yourself into awareness, seeing them clearly, and giving them a constructive place in your life. When you deny your shadow, you project it onto others. You see in others what you cannot face in yourself. For example, someone who suppresses their own aggression may constantly accuse others of being hostile. This process of projection fuels conflict in relationships, communities, and even nations. By owning your shadow, you reduce the need to blame others for what lives inside you. Confronting the shadow is painful because it shatters illusions of perfection. Yet it is also liberating. The shadow contains not only darkness, but also hidden potential. Courage, creativity, and passion often hide behind the qualities you repress. By accepting the fullness of your humanity, you unlock strengths you never knew you had. Jung believed that only by making peace with the shadow can a person achieve wholeness. The superior individual is not the one who appears flawless, but the one who courageously faces their flaws and transforms them into sources of wisdom. This confrontation is not a one-time event, but a lifelong process. Each stage of life brings new shadows to integrate. But with every step, you grow stronger, clearer, and more authentic. You stop running from yourself, and in doing so, you discover freedom. Jung discovered that the unconscious is not purely personal. Beneath individual experience lies a collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols, myths, and instincts that all humans inherit. From this realm emerge archetypes, universal patterns that shape how we perceive the world and live our lives. The archetypes appear in myths, religions, and stories across cultures. The hero who struggles and transforms. The wise old man who guides. The mother who nurtures and protects. The trickster who disrupts and reshapes. These are not simply characters outside of us, they live within each of us, influencing how we act and interpret reality. Archetypes help us understand the roles we play in life, and the inner forces that drive us. A man may unconsciously live under the influence of the hero, always seeking challenges, victories, and recognition. A woman may embody the mother, nurturing others, yet neglecting her own needs. To awaken as a superior being means to recognize these archetypal forces, and to use them with awareness instead of being unconsciously controlled by them. Jung also spoke of the anima and animus, archetypes representing the feminine within men, and the masculine within women. A man who ignores his anima may become overly rational, rigid, or emotionally closed. He projects his inner feminine onto women around him, expecting them to carry what he refuses to see in himself. Likewise, a woman who rejects her animus may struggle to assert herself, or she may project exaggerated authority onto men. The path of growth requires balance. A man who embraces his anima learns empathy, creativity, and emotional depth. A woman who integrates her animus awakens clarity, strength, and independence. When these forces unite, the individual becomes whole, no longer divided, but harmonized. This integration is not about blurring gender, but about embracing the full spectrum of human potential. The superior person is neither trapped in rigid masculinity nor limited by narrow femininity. Instead, they rise above opposites, embodying a balance that allows wisdom and power to flow together. All of Jung's ideas point toward one ultimate process: individuation. This is the journey of becoming who you truly are, not a copy of others, not a mask you wear for society, but the complete integration of your conscious and unconscious self. Individuation is not easy. It demands honesty, courage, and deep self-reflection. It requires confronting the shadow, integrating archetypes, and balancing anima with animus. Yet, it is the only path toward real freedom. Through individuation, the ego surrenders its illusion of control, and the self, the totality of your being, emerges as the guiding center. You no longer chase meaning outside yourself, because meaning begins to unfold from within. A person who walks the path of individuation is no longer divided. They live with purpose, clarity, and authenticity. Their relationships deepen, because they no longer project their unresolved conflicts onto others. Their creativity flourishes, because they draw from the vast depths of the unconscious. And their presence itself inspires others, because they radiate the rare strength of someone who has truly met themselves. For Jung, individuation was not optional, it was the destiny of every human soul. The question is whether we choose to walk the path consciously, or remain trapped in the unconscious patterns that rule our lives. For Jung, dreams and creativity were not random, they were bridges into the unconscious. Every dream carries symbols, drawn from both personal memory and the collective unconscious. These symbols speak in the language of metaphor, revealing truths the conscious mind often ignores. To dismiss dreams as meaningless is to ignore messages from the deepest part of yourself. Jung believed that by studying dreams, by writing them down and reflecting on their symbols, we can uncover hidden fears, unresolved conflicts, and untapped potential. Similarly, creativity is an expression of the unconscious. Art, music, poetry, philosophy, these are not mere pastimes. They are the soul's attempt to make the invisible visible. When you paint, write, or create, you are giving form to inner truths that cannot be expressed in ordinary speech. To nurture creativity and honor your dreams is to open a channel to the unconscious. Through this channel, healing, growth, and transformation become possible. The superior individual listens to the whispers of the unconscious and uses creativity not for vanity, but for integration. At the heart of Jung's vision stands the self. The self is not the ego, the small I that plans, struggles, and seeks recognition. The self is the totality of your being, conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, past and future. It is the guiding principle that leads you toward wholeness. While the ego sees only fragments, the self seeks unity. When you follow the path of individuation, you are moving closer to the self, aligning with the deepest truth of who you are meant to become. Encountering the self often feels like encountering something larger than yourself, something sacred, timeless, and eternal. Jung even suggested that humanity's experience of God throughout history is a reflection of the archetype of the self. To awaken the self is to transcend narrow identity. You are no longer limited by the roles society assigns, or by the masks you wear to survive. Instead, you live in harmony with your inner totality. The superior human being is not a slave to the ego, but a servant of the self. Jung's psychology does not promise perfection, it promises wholeness. A superior human being is not someone flawless, but someone conscious. They have faced their shadow, integrated their archetypes, balanced their inner forces, and begun the lifelong process of individuation. Such a person is not easily swayed by external pressures. They do not blindly follow the crowd, nor do they project their fears onto others. Instead, they live with clarity, depth, and authenticity. They understand that life's meaning cannot be handed down from outside, it must be discovered within. To live as a superior human being is to embrace complexity, to carry both light and darkness, and to act from awareness rather than ignorance. It is to stand firmly rooted in the self, while remaining open to the mystery of existence. This path is not easy, and it is never complete. But every step toward wholeness brings freedom, freedom from illusions, freedom from unconscious control, freedom from living someone else's life. The question that remains is simple, yet profound. Are you willing to take that step?